Two creeps in a van. I'm confident I would have become a missing persons case that night. I apologize in advance. I'm not a great writer, but I'll do my best to share my experience. To paint the picture better, here's a short description of me at the time of the incident 3 years ago. I was a 26-year-old woman, 5 feet 5 inches, around 175 pounds, with medium-length bleach blonde hair and a curvy build. I was wearing black high-waisted tights and a pink crop top. 3 years ago, I was walking home late at night from a friend's house. It was dark, and at the time I lived in a rough part of a large city. I'd been in many sketchy situations before, but always managed to get myself out of them, so I guess I felt a bit invincible. Like nothing truly scary could happen to me. Still, I always stayed alert and aware of my surroundings. About halfway home, I'm roughly 10 minutes from my apartment. I noticed a van start following me. This wasn't unusual. In my city, it was sadly common for young women in rough areas to be propositioned for sex. It's embarrassing how desensitized I had become to this. I did what I usually did, crossed the street so I'd be walking beside traffic heading in the opposite direction. I wasn't scared, just annoyed. The van turned down a side street, then came back onto the road and pulled up beside me. I still wasn't scared. This had happened countless times before. No matter what I was wearing, from a crop top to a long zipped up winter coat, the area was notorious for this kind of behavior. I decided to be firm and told the driver sternly, "I'm not interested." That's when I noticed there were two men in the van. They looked almost identical, at maybe twins or brothers. Both had very dark complexions, dark eyes, and short dark hair. The van didn't move. I was irritated now, so I crossed the road again to get away. I figured that would be enough to make them stop following me. It wasn't. They kept circling back. Every time I crossed, they did too, and that's when I started to feel genuinely unsafe. They sped past me with the flow of traffic, and I yelled at them to fuck us off. For about 3 minutes, I didn't see the van and thought they were finally gone. Just in case, I pulled out my phone and started to call my sister, who I lived with. But before I could even dial, the van suddenly pulled up next to me again. One of the men jumped out, opened the back door, and rushed toward me aggressively, like he was about to grab me and throw me inside. The street was empty, and I realized that's probably what they'd been waiting for. Just as he was about to touch me, I tilted my phone toward him and said loudly, "You're being filmed in my live video chat. My friends already have your license plate number, and the police have been notified." I was terrified, but I didn't show it. I stayed calm, pretending to stream him live. He hesitated, clearly unsure whether I was bluffing. I tilted my phone even more, as if to give the audience a better look at him. He froze, then jumped back into the van and they sped off. I've never been the same since that night. Now, I'm afraid to walk alone, even during the day. Almost gave a serial killer a ride. A little background first. My father was in the army for 21 years before retiring and moving to a very small town in Central Florida. After a couple of years, he got bored. Even though we didn't need the money, between his pension and my mom's bookkeeping and tax prep work, he wanted to stay busy. So he started working at various gas stations around town. It was a small town and the owners didn't mind if I helped him stock coolers or run the register, as long as I didn't sell beer or cigarettes. This was in the late 1980s and early 1990s. The story I'm about to tell happened in 1990. I remember it clearly because it was shortly after my birthday. At 15, I had just gotten my learner's permit, and my dad would let me drive him to and from work to get experience, both during the day and at night. That evening, I was sitting in my usual spot, by the window with a book, a Mountain Dew, and some snacks. I spent most evenings that way, reading and occasionally helping out. At some point, I looked up because something unusual caught my eye. A woman was walking up the parking lot from the direction of the interstate. Our gas station sat right on I-75. It was strange. Nobody ever walked from that direction. I figured maybe her car had broken down, and she was coming to use the phone to call a tow truck. I was wrong. She came into the store, looked around for a minute, and immediately gave me a strange, uneasy feeling. Then she walked up to the counter and told my dad a story about how she'd gotten stranded and needed a ride to the next big town north of us, Ocala. My dad told her he couldn't help. He was working. She turned to look at me, and while she wasn't watching, my dad caught my eye and shook his head firmly. No. I was confused for a moment, but then she turned back to him and asked if I could take her. My dad quickly replied that I only had a learner's permit and couldn't drive her anywhere. Normally, I might have argued. I'd already driven alone a few times before. but his reaction was so out of character. He was usually friendly and talkative with customers, but this time he was cold and dismissive. She cursed him out, slammed the door so hard I thought the glass would break, and stormed off down the driveway. I watched as she made her way back up the interstate ramp heading north. Almost a year later, just before my 16th birthday, I heard my dad yell from the living room, "Son, get your ass in here and look at this." I ran in and saw him pointing at the TV. On the screen was a mugshot of that same woman. It turns out I had almost given a ride to Aileen Wuornos, who was later convicted as a serial killer and eventually executed. To this day, I still have nightmares about what could have happened if my dad hadn't trusted his gut. I think there's someone living in my shed. The title says it all, but it also doesn't say enough. Lately, I've been noticing something off about my home, like there's someone else here besides me, my wife, and our 2 dogs. I couldn't quite put my finger on it until today. For context, I live in a duplex. We share the property with another guy in his mid-20s. He has his own unit, we have ours, but we share a laundry room that leads to our respective backyards, which are divided by a fence. This all started about 2 months ago when that guy texted me, "Hey man, just a heads up, like someone stole my bike out of the sunroom." That was creepy because to reach the sunroom/laundry area, someone would have had to hop a brick fence surrounded by dense shrubbery and then haul the bike over it. Unless, of course, the thief had the balls to just walk it straight out one of our front doors while we weren't home. Either way, it didn't feel right. From then on, I made sure to keep the doors locked. Fast forward to a few weeks ago. I let my dogs out into the backyard and one of them started sniffing around the shed. It's getting warmer, so I figured maybe they chased a lizard under the door. I finally got them inside and didn't think much of it. I hardly ever go into that shed. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just out of the way, and I'm not really a hang out in the shed kind of guy. We mostly use it for storage, old furniture, camping gear, suitcases, boring suburban junk. Maybe we open it 3 times a year, but after 18 straight days of my dogs obsessing over it, I decided to check inside. Maybe there was a raccoon or something, or a Komodo dragon for all I knew. No Komodo. But what I did find made me literally piss myself. Inside the shed was my neighbor's stolen bike. My first thought was, oh my god, my wife's a klepto. Then I quickly ruled that out. She hates biking. Next thought, my neighbor is gonna think I stole his damn bike. It was in my shed. How could I explain that? Plus, I wanted to give it back, but now it just looked bad. I kept looking around and found one of our sleeping bags unraveled and balled up behind a box. Inside it were about $20 in singles and change. There was also a garbage bag full of food wrappers. That's when my brain finally caught up with reality. Someone I don't know had been living in my shed, or maybe still is. Maybe my dog scared them off, or maybe they just sleep there at night and leave during the day. If they weren't planning on coming back, why would they leave their money behind? I left everything as it was and locked up. I realized they must have used the spare key I keep hidden in the backyard. I brought it inside with me that night. Tomorrow I'm installing cameras. Hopefully whoever it was gets the message and moves on. Please, wish me luck. And let's hope this person isn't a lunatic or worse, a serial killer. Possible murderer, serial killer encounter in Maine. Not really sure how to begin this. The title will make more sense after reading my experience. This happened in the summer of 2004. My family was supposed to vacation in Kennebunkport, Maine. My dad was stuck in meetings in Manhattan, so he planned to come up a few days later. My mom decided to drive us there, me, my brother, and my sister. I was 14 at the time. The drive was long and uneventful, but we hit several delays and ended up arriving much later than expected. Because of that, the owners of the rental house had already gone to bed, and we couldn't reach them to get the keys. Bad planning, I know. But apparently they were very strict about pickup times, so we decided to get dinner first. My mom was craving lobster, so we stopped at one of our favorite spots. She called my dad to ask him to book us a hotel room from New York while we ate. While we were there, a man came up and started chatting with my mom. He seemed friendly. Preppy, clean cut, totally normal, nothing creepy. My dad called back, no hotels available anywhere nearby. Peak vacation season. The man must have overheard because after my mom hung up, he came back and said, "You can stay at my place. I've got a big house with a guest house out back. My wife won't mind." I immediately thought, absolutely not. There was no way I was sleeping in some random man's house in rural Maine at night. But my mom, being cautious yet polite, chatted with him. He said he worked in finance, and since my mom was an investment banker, they talked shop for a bit. She seemed convinced he was legit. I called my dad in a panic, but he told me I was overreacting and that not everyone was out to get us, and people in Maine were just friendly. So we followed him to his house. The guest house was beautiful and fully furnished, but something felt off. There were 2 bedrooms, but in each, the beds were pushed right under the windows instead of centered. It looked unnatural. That night, as we were settling in, there was a knock on the door. It was the man, just checking in to make sure we were settled. Nice, I guess. But 30 minutes later, another knock. He was checking in again. At this point, my mom politely said, "Thanks, we're fine. We'll come by in the morning to say thank you." About 45 minutes later, I couldn't sleep. The place was dead quiet. Then I heard rustling outside, which was strange because there weren't any trees or bushes near the guest house. I saw my mom wide awake, motioning to the window. None of the windows had curtains. The man said his wife was redecorating. When I looked, I saw a man standing right there outside the window, watching us. My heart stopped. We didn't know how long he'd been there. When he finally walked away, my mom whispered for us to pack up quietly. We had my dad on the phone. He was yelling, but she ignored him. Around 2 a.m., we got into the car. My mom drove up to the main house to return the key, but the house was completely dark. Not just dark, empty. No lights, no cars, nothing. It looked abandoned. The 2 cars we'd seen earlier, gone. At that point, my mom didn't say a word. We just left. When we got to the gate, we found it padlocked shut from the inside. My dad yelled through the phone, "Rev it!" We were in an SUV, so my mom floored it and broke through the gate. We drove straight back to New York City in silence. We've never gone back to Maine. My parents refused to talk about it afterward. Years later, I asked a relative about it when he was drunk. He said quietly, "They didn't tell you. The actual owners of that house were on vacation." So, who the hell was that man? I still wonder if there were any serial killers traveling through Maine around that time. Thank you for watching. Share your thoughts about this in the comments. See you tomorrow.